sing out a song of the soul. And we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And we can sing.
Music has an incredible ability to proclaim the soul's language beyond what mere words can speak. That is what we seek as we invite our guests to share their song of the soul. Be it joy and laughter, sorrow and tears, awe and insight, or deepest devotion, as we visit and listen, we are all part of a spiritual voyage called Song of the Soul. After 18 years, we welcome back David Rovics today to share his second Song of the Soul. David has made an expansive career in writing and sharing music of protest, providing energy for and insights into the issues and mechanics of making a better life for those in the U.S. and around the world. His many dozens of albums cover the gamut, with genres especially of folk and folk punk, but also touches of children's music, metal, and rock. With inspiration from and parallels to activists, folks like Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, and Phil Oakes, nothing stops David. With lots of songs to share, today is part one of a two-part Song of the Soul with David. Thanks to Andrew Jansen for production assistance on this program. David Rovics joins us from Portland, Oregon via Zoom for part one of his second Song of the Soul. David, it's so great to have you back for Song of the Soul.
Wonderful to be back.
Have you been busy since 2008, since I last had you on Song of the Soul?
Yeah, there's been a fair few number of events that have taken place between then and now.
When I interviewed you, Obama was not yet president. There was Trump 4 years in there, Biden for 4, and then now we're back to Trump for this past year. What have been the best years of your last since 2008? What have been your best years?
Gosh, it's a very interesting question because none of the years from 2008 to the present are the ones that I tend to think of as my best years, really. I mean, times that I, as with so many other people, so many of the boomers I grew up with who are reminiscing about the 60s, I find myself now being one of those people reminiscing about things that were happening 25 years ago during the global justice movement of the late 90s and early aughts and the anti-war movement of the post 9/11 period. I mean, there was a lot going on, and I was very plugged into a lot of social movements that were going on in different countries, actually all over the world. And my life has not been like that since then, really. And I guess there's been a lot of good times since 2008 that I mostly associate with children, because I had one in 2016 and another in 2019, and I've had a lot of good tours and a lot of good times at home. But yeah, there's a lot of things that really fell apart in terms of both political and musical activities in the world, in my world, and in many other people's worlds, I'd say. When I look back and reminisce, it's at pre-2008 times primarily,
Back when I did the Spirit in Action interview with you in 2008, Layla was in the background happily chattering away as a 2-year-old or almost 2-year-old. And she was delightful in her own little way there. Now that she's 20 or so, it's a different life, but you still have your 7 and 9-year-old. Were they your companions going through COVID? Was that how you made it through?
Oh, yeah. It was such a different experience from what so many others that I was kind of in touch with were having. I mean, of course, like so many other touring musicians, I was not touring during COVID, and that was more of a mental health crisis for a lot of musicians, including me, than anything else, really. And I mean, it wasn't a financial crisis, because for me and for other American musicians, capable of spending inordinate amount of times on the phone, on hold, or getting rejected and whatever, but, eventually there was gig unemployment, for gig workers. So, it wasn't as so much a financial disaster as a mental health one, but it would have been so much worse if not for the kids. I mean, it was just, I had a wonderful little family to hang out with and keep me company throughout that period. So, yeah, it wasn't the isolated, lonely, depressed experience that so many people had, although it was rough, for sure. When the kids were young, yeah, that was their youth was very much wrapped up in COVID. So different from when Layla was 2, and we were on the road together all the time. She was my traveling companion for much of her life when she was 2. I mean, her mom was in medical school, so if I was on the road, it was really hard to figure out how to look after her. But the easy plan B was, well, Papa takes her on the road. So I took her on the road a lot for daycare purposes, you could say. But it was great.
I had some experience with that when my son was young. Each year I'd have a week or two where I'd be touring, doing folk dancing, international folk dancing, which I would teach and lead. And my son, when he's 2 and 3 years old, all the way from when he was a baby, would often be on the road with us. He just got used to it, you know?
Yeah, they get used to it. They love it. It's a routine, right? And then they know, like with Layla, like wherever the stage was, wherever she figured out what the stage was, that was her home, you know? That's where Papa's going to be performing, and that's where I'm hanging out, you know? So she'd just be, yeah, it's a nice.
What's your division of labor with respect to music and parenting these days?
These days, what I discovered when my eldest daughter, Layla, turned 5 was basically once they're in school, you have ridiculous amounts of free time every day. If you're not working some kind of normal job, like, I've tended to pretty much avoid my entire adult life. So once I had that experience the first time around, I kind of got the drill. And certainly, I had a lot less free time whenever there's a kid around who's under the age of 5. Basically, you have a lot less free time. And then once they're kind of in some kind of normal full-time school schedule, as they tend to be from the age of 5 up in most societies, including our family, suddenly I'm alone all day, every day during the weekdays. So figuring out the mix for that as far as writing and reading and playing music and all that is no problem. But of course, being a performer also involves touring. So I've done a lot less touring since I started having kids, but I'm still on the road several months out of the year.
In gathering songs for this, your second full Song of the Soul, you gathered a lot, which are your classics, most popular ones, and you've gathered a lot of current ones. Is there a change in the density of political activism songs, or has that just been uniform throughout your career? How many albums do you have?
Oh, I guess about 50, 51, 52, something like that, albums over the years. And no, it's been pretty consistent. I probably write more often. I mean, the older I get, the more I do this. To humbly, hopefully say, I think the better I get at it. And it gets easier to do this, to express what I want to express in the form of a song. It gets easier over time as far as the lyric writing part goes, and how to form lines that work and stick and express what I'm trying to say and evoke certain emotional responses and don't sound cliche, all that kind of stuff. I just get better at it over time, and it gets easier to do more of. I think it's kind of like playing chess. When you play chess more, you get better at it. And I don't play chess much, but, you start thinking more about advanced moves, so when I'm thinking about writing a song, I'm thinking about how it's going to end and what I'm trying to say, and I'm mapping it out, and I'm not stuck on coming up with a rhyme or, these kinds of things. So I'd say I'm doing the same kind of thing I was doing before, just doing it more and better.
And is there any chance that you're feeling more urgency getting the words out now that you're middle-aged? It's like, I got to get them out because I only have another 40 years. So I got to get all these songs out right now.
I guess there's always this sense of urgency about it for me. And there always has been. And, that's maybe partly born out of some kind of bizarre and perhaps arrogant idea that any of my songs could possibly make a difference in the world. But then it's also born out of that idea that music is really important and does make a difference in the world. And perhaps my songs could too. And who knows, like the butterfly effect, you just never know. You got to just do what you do and put it out there as best you can and hope it makes a difference. But it's not going to make a difference unless you get it out there. So, I'm always thinking about those songs in the world, in history that have really gotten people together and inspired people and helped educate leaders in different key situations and all sorts of roles that music has played over time. I'm always thinking about those things and how, who knows, this next song might be the one that somehow or another the right person in the right position of power hears and it melts their heart, or this might be the song that inspires somebody to organize something, or you're just always hoping and always feeling that sense of urgency about it.
We can always hope that it works that way, that we put that song in and the change comes. And obviously there are some songs that have done that over the years. As people try and pick up activism now in the years of Trump and the No Kings rallies, I see the struggle going on not to just fall back on the standards from the civil rights movement or whatever. They got to have the new ones, but I'm not sure that's fully coalesced. Are there songs you've seen that seem to capture the message of these days, yours or others?
Yes, a lot of them. But the movement, to the extent there's the social movements in this country now and for the past 15 years or more have been really almost completely decoupled from culture. And it's extremely alarming to me that there's hardly any role for music or culture on the left or on any kind of social movements in this country for quite a while now. And there's also, as you mentioned, this desire not to sound like the civil rights movement or the 60s or something like that. This has been a theme on the left since 1970 or so, not to sound like the 60s. Certainly my entire life since I've been a child and at all aware. I was born in 67. And since I've been aware of anything, I've been aware that the 60s is a period to be vilified, derided, caricatured. And I think there's really no question that the powers that be, the same powers that be that were carrying out the consistent program to undermine, misdirect, and neutralize the American left from the inception of the FBI up until 1971, that we have all as a matter of the written record as a result of the raid of the Pennsylvania FBI offices in 1971 by the commission to investigate the FBI that made off with 1,000 secret documents and published them to the New York Times and the Washington Post and stuff. COINTELPRO, we found out about COINTELPRO and what the FBI had been doing to undermine the left and to disconnect the left from anything like useful, to make sure that the left was as misdirected as possible in terms of any kind of like useful organizing, doing anything, good, and directing it in the direction of making the wrong decisions in terms of being popular, in order to marginalize the left. And they started with the industrial workers of the world. They moved on to the Communist Party, then the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, so many other groups. What they've been doing since 1971 is not a matter of the public record nearly so much, because we don't have a similar big dump of secret documents indicating what kinds of activities they've been involved with to undermine, misdirect, and neutralize the left since 1971. But what I can say from my lifetime of experience as a left-wing musician trying to be a movement musician in this country is everything basically completely fell apart right around the time that Pete Seeger died, which may or may not be related, but I'm sure it's not completely incidental. Like the idea that music has any role to play in social movements on demonstrations pretty much collapsed at that point. And I haven't sung at a protest, and I can't even remember when the last time was in this country. I have to leave the country to ever, get invited to sing at a protest, literally. I've never been on the bill at a folk festival in the United States. This is the atmosphere that they've created, this total division between culture and politics in this country. And they did that because it's so powerful. They've always known how powerful it is.
And because you're a bit younger, is that why it was okay for Bruce Springsteen and Joan Baez to be on the stage in Minneapolis for the No Kings 3? They're up there doing the music, and there were actually some other folks doing some fine stuff there. They're a little older than you. I mean, Joan is significantly older. Is it okay to go back to those old folks like Pete Seeger, that generation, and get them on stage? That's okay. But David Rovix is too much danger?
Well, Generally, they're the exception. I mean, there's, of course, political rallies, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they both still use live music at their events. But I think we have to distinguish between sort of official events put on by parties and organizations closely associated with parties like those two, and sort of more organic social movement kinds of things. But it's not entirely the case that young people aren't, like, I don't even know if Jesse Wells or Carsey Blanton sang at any of the No Kings protests. I haven't looked. I don't think either of them did.
Carsey did. I saw her announcing that, yeah.
That's good.
And Jesse Wells, I mean, he's been hitting so popular these days in a wider sense.
Yeah.
But I don't remember specifically about seeing something for him planned for No Kings 3. But he certainly obviously fits there. He's a dynamo of that. I can't believe how much he turns out.
Yeah, and he's incredibly prolific, incredibly talented, and there's also a lot of people who are much less well-known who are also really talented and prolific and writing great, incisive stuff about what's happening in the world, and they're not singing at any protests, and nobody knows who they are. They're not getting invited to sing at protests. It's a very different situation in other countries, which is one of the reasons why I think there's nefarious activity going back generations involved here with the particular scene that we've developed in this country being sort of paralyzed by identity politics, as the left has been here for a long time. It is not unique to the United States, but the extent of it is unique to the United States. And it is virtually unique to the English-speaking world. This is not a phenomenon you find outside of the English-speaking world to nearly the same degree. And so I feel like there's a lot about how the culture in this country has become sort of paralyzed and incapable of decent organizing sort of intrinsically because of our internalized hatred of our own society and our own selves and our, this whole kind of idea that we don't have a culture, that has become something that a preposterous notion that has been internalized by a very large number of especially left-wing Americans, especially white left-wing Americans. It's really a hugely paralyzing problem for the left. And I think these ideas came from somewhere else and they were, introduced into our midst in all sorts of nefarious ways that we have no idea how nefarious they are because it's secret. And that's how because the secret police are secret. That's how they work, so we don't know what they're doing. But we can contrast this society with other societies and see, wow, you go to Denmark and you see they don't seem to have become crippled by identity politics, and the left still functions and they still respect and admire older people here and think that they're interesting, and they want to invite them to sing at their youth gatherings. And this is just like, what the hell is going on here? None of this stuff would happen in the United States for all sorts of reasons having to do with identity politics that many Americans would be able to even explain, why this happens, but it just doesn't happen there. And then things function so much better like they used to function here.
I have a sense that your touring abroad has helped keep you alive politically and the essential force that you need to do that kind of long-term organizing. I've met a lot of folk-oriented folks who, I'm going to go off to the British Isles. I'm going to go to Scandinavia. I'm going France and Germany and so on. And they've got a lot of life. It seems like there's a reception, open-mindedness, open heart, whatever, a willingness that's there that is harder to find in the United States. By the way, on No Kings 3, on stage here, first of all, Indivisible head organizer here, her name's Cindy Greening. She's been doing a great job organizing here. There's been real life in it here. And there was lots of young musicians on stage here for No Kings 3. So just got to come find Humbird and some others that you'll find around here.
You got to get to the smaller towns, like you're part of Wisconsin, places like that are less under the sort of control of the Indivisible Central or under the influence of the Democratic Party. I mean, you'll find some place like New York City, you won't have anybody on stage talking about Palestine, whereas in Olympia, Washington, you will. I mean, that's not an accident.
Well, you know what? We've got you here, David. And folks, we are speaking with David Rovics. I love this insight into music and organizing. which it's always played such a big part of your life, your activism. I assume you do write songs about your child's third birthday as well. And I assume that heartbreak and such has to come in once in a while. Heartbreak that's not about Gaza.
I've written about maybe one album's worth of love songs, I suppose. Maybe actually at this point, it's probably several. And also I spent 2 years when my daughter was born. For the first 2 years of her life, I wrote nothing but children's music, put out 2 albums of children's songs. So yeah, I go in different directions musically now and then, but 95% of the time it's about politics, but only 95%, not 100.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I'm quite aware that for this Song of the Soul, the songs you've picked out are, I think calling them political is a fair acknowledgement. I think that anything that affects our society as a whole is worth naming and focusing on and using change to make it better. So why don't you get us started with some of the music for this Song of the Soul that's coming straight to us from David Rovics.
Oh, let's start with Failed State.
Let's start with Failed State. That sounds ominous and true and accurate. When did you write Failed State? Where is it shared? Again, there's a torrent of music always coming from you. This is track 13 on which album?
Yeah, I first wrote the song around when Trump was first elected in his first term, and it's just a song that goes through various aspects of society and how completely messed up the United States is, and how, it's just getting worse, and it's basically, in so many ways a failed state, as they like to call other states whose economies they destroy through sanctions or whatever, and then our wars, and then they call them failed states, and but in so many ways, the United States is a failed state, and even was a failed state when I wrote the song 10 years ago. And this song has become one of my most popular songs, as they do. You get to find out from the streaming platforms, what songs are the ones people are listening to the most. And sometimes it's pretty evident from the shows, too, which ones they've been listening to as far as how they respond and sing along and request certain ones. But this is one of the ones that are the most listened to and requested of my songs.
We've got some uplifting music for David Rovics' Song of the Soul, Failed State from early Trump dynasty. You may cry and grimace, and you may, in fact, want to close your eyes, go to sleep, but we all need to recognize that we are living in a failed state.
When you're working 2 jobs and living in a tent, when a house costs $1 million and you can't pay the rent, when politicians say they'll help but it keeps getting worse each time the landlord lobby pulls the strings of the purse, when the human right to housing isn't even part of the debate, you're living in a failed state. Millions of citizens are spending half their lives locked up in a prison for trying to survive. When laws must be broken just to have a place to stay. When the prisons pay the senators to look the other way. If you have to be a criminal to put food upon your plate, you're living in a failed state. Facing climate breakdown, when the trees are all on fire, when half the country's underwater, when a climate change denier runs the nation and the opposition party votes for oil rigs and pipelines. This is not so much a country as it is a corporation buckling under its weight. You're living in a failed state. Your nation is an empire facing daily blowback, and the only thing your leaders can think to do is attack. Bipartisan consensus that we need to spend $700 billion before the year's end on a military budget to make America great. You know you're living in a failed state. When almost every day some psycho with a gun has to open fire on a crowd before it's done. When a music festival becomes a free fire zone, and all they can say is it's okay now, he was acting alone. Buy some armor, pray to God, and hide behind a gate. You know you're living in a failed state. You know you're living in a failed state. You know you're living in a failed state.
And David Rovix points out that you can also dance to this song. And as a dancer, international folk dancer, I do all other kinds of dance too. A song like Failed State with such strong energy demands something out of our body. And fortunately, David Rovix provides the music to move us along. I think that actually is a good antidote to the disempowerment and being shut down when you've got something you can move to. It's something you can flex your body to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You commented, about how it went over the years. I remember feeling like under George W. Bush, failed state issues. And then when Donald Trump began his first term, oh no, this is really what failed state is. And then this past year, I said, there's failure and then there's failure.
Just keeps getting worse. It's just amazing. Like just when you thought you'd hit the bottom and seen how bad it can get, it just perpetually keeps on getting like really, really significantly worse.
I don't suppose you know the Melvina Reynolds song that goes, so you think you hit bottom? Oh no, there's a bottom below. She nailed that one.
I've used the same rhyme though, communicating the same thing. Didn't know it had been done before.
I should mention that you do your music. I mean, I assume touring mostly it's just you going. I don't know if you have a road manager and everybody else.
For many, many years now, I'm usually traveling with my good friend Kamala Emanuel, who is a singer from Australia who travels and sings with me. She's a doctor, so she manages to support her music habit by doctoring, and we'll be traveling together in Europe from 9 days for over a month. And then we'll be touring around the northwestern U.S. and Canada in June, July. So, yeah, I travel a lot with her, and I travel a lot by myself as well.
Now, you pronounce that Kamala, right? Or
yeah, Kamala. Emphasis on the second
Kamala.
syllable.
Okay.
No.
Boy, you're going to mess up so many minds.
Oh, I know. I even would when Kamala Harris was running, I was calling Kamala, by accident, because it's just, I eventually got very, very, very facile at pronouncing it with the first or second syllable emphasized.
And when you perform with Kamala, are you still David Rovix, or are you, in fact, what are you together?
Well, together we often call ourselves the Ministry of Culture, which I've taken to use as a sort of umbrella for all the different musical projects that I'm involved with. But it's sort of neither here or there in a sense, because as far as the algorithms and the platforms are concerned, it's all about David Rovix, and these other names are irrelevant. They don't get into the algorithms anytime I put anything out as the Ministry of Culture, or I'm also doing a lot of work on writing music with an AI band, and I call my AI band collaborations Aitsuno. But when I put out stuff as Aitsuno, it also doesn't get anyone listening to it because it's not in the recommendation algorithms on Spotify or YouTube, and that's what makes people hear anything on those platforms,
Just a comment or two more about Failed State before we move on to a lot of your other music. Is your hopelessness greater than under the previous descending qualities of Failed State? I mean, many people lament what's going on, and then we see, oh no, this is really bad. Has this dragged you down?
Yeah, I mean, I would answer that question in multiple ways, and it's sort of multiple questions. But I think a social movement can change anything and everything. A well-organized, visionary, inclusive, highly musical, rooted in culture kind of social movement can change entire societies, can change the world. So whenever there is that kind of social movement happening, which I haven't experienced for a long time, but have experienced at various points in various countries at different times, mostly a long time ago. But when there is such a social movement happening, there's the general feeling that we can really accomplish anything. We really have a real power here with this. There's a general consciousness here that if those in power don't, reckon with this, they're not going to last long. There's that kind of feeling when there's that kind of social movement happening. And history is abundantly will provide us with so many examples of political structures that had to really change as a result of pressure from social movements, having nothing to do with elections, who got elected, but all parties in various countries and various times and situations having to bow to the pressure of social movements. And that's happened on many occasions in the United States. Much more political change has happened in the United States as a result of social movements than as a result of elections. I can make a very strong case for that, going back centuries. So my lack of hopefulness in recent years is born entirely out of the lack of a social movement that's coherent, and that's the kind of social movement we need, not the kind that doesn't alienate people but actually attracts people and builds on itself. We haven't had a social movement like that in a long time. That's what we need. And when there's such a movement and I'm traveling around playing at protests and then I feel very hopeful no matter what's happening. But when that's been sort of driven out of society and out of our minds, or somehow isn't happening for whatever reason, there's a general lack of optimism, and so there's no movement, or for whatever combination of reasons that's not happening, then it's a very hopeless feeling that I have and that a lot of people have.
Well, your music tends to give me hope and clarity, thoughts that we can pull together. So why don't you give us some more of that? And maybe our listeners for Song of the Soul will have that same feeling.
Well, let's do St. Patrick Battalion. That's the second song I have in our list here, which I guess when I was making this list, I kind of ordered it in a way that felt sensible at the time, somehow or other. St. Patrick Battalion, that's, I guess, possibly my most popular song that I've written, and certainly the one that gets covered the most. It's probably responsible for, a large minority of my plays on YouTube, and it's been covered by bands all over the world. It's probably the only song I've written that I could say that became a folk song by Pete Seeger's definition of what a folk song is, a song that other people sing. That's a folk song. It's a hopeful song about, you can write a hopeful song about something that didn't overall, was not a hopeful situation. The Mexican-American War, when the United States invaded Mexico in 1846, it was just a naked war of aggression to steal a whole lot of land that they could steal because they had a bigger army and they were invading a smaller country with a smaller army that wasn't as well organized. And then, of course, one of the main reasons the U.S. invaded Mexico, as I would guarantee most listeners are not aware of, is that Mexico had abolished slavery, and the Anglo-American, settlers in Texas wanted to keep their slaves, and so they fomented a revolt and then inspired the United States to back their revolt against the Mexican authorities in order to keep their slaves. So, there were a lot of people drafted into the U.S. military who were coming over to the U.S. in massive numbers from the troubles happening in Europe, the hunger and famine and wars and rebellions that characterized Europe in the 1840s. And the refugees that came over to the U.S. from there at that time were given a uniform and a gun and told to go kill Mexicans. But thousands and thousands of them deserted from the ranks of the U.S. military, which is inspiring in itself, and became Mexicans, preferring to live in Mexico and then kill Mexicans. They became Mexicans. But there were 202 of them who not only deserted from the U.S. military, but joined the Mexican military, and they were and most of them were killed in battle, and most of them were Irish, and they were called the St. Patrick Battalion. And I had the great pleasure just 1 year and a couple weeks ago of going to Mexico and singing this song in Mexico at a festival in Mexico City where I discovered that Irish music and dance is tremendously popular in Mexico, and there's so many amazing Irish musicians and dancers, Mexican, Irish, well, I don't know if they're Irish at all necessarily, many, of Irish descent, but they're Mexican people, who are just phenomenally good at Irish music and Irish dance. And the main difference being that they often dress much more traditionally Irish costume, like as they often dress the part, rather than just wearing jeans and t-shirts like Irish people do. They look more Irish, because there's a 19th century kind of look, that's very popular among the. I don't know if that's just at the festivals or how often they actually dress that way, but. Yeah, it was amazing. And of course the St. Patrick Battalion is as much loved there as Irish music and dance and St. Patrick and, generally, the battalion everybody knows about it and loves it. Unlike here where, it's very much suppressed history. But in Mexico and in Ireland, it's well-known history.
St. Patrick Battalion, maybe number one hit, if you will, by David Rovics.
My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We marched beneath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin go Bragh, bright with the harp and the shamrock and Libertad para la Republica. Just 50 years after Wolfetone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, where their volunteers were raping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in 5 major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego. We witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
That song, St. Patrick Battalion, was such a hit that David Rovics has shared it both when I interviewed him back in 2008 and today. When you got something good, don't forget to flaunt it.
That's right. It's one of, there might be two songs on this list that are old enough that they could have been in the 2008 discussion, but that one for sure, because I wrote that 26 years ago.
And when you want to track David Rovics down for Song of the Soul and Spirit in Action, and I've interviewed him for both, you go to northernspiritradio.org and you search David Rovics. His website is davidrovics.com, and that's just one of the many places you can find him. He's got 50-some albums out there. You're going to be hard-pressed to get it all in 1 week, so just decide to give up on everything else and just run David Rovic on rerun through your mind. You'll capture so much richness. Before we go on, and I'm going to speed up here with respect to the music shortly, David, I wanted to talk to you about something we mentioned a little bit before we got on the air, because I have this thing for both my Song of the Soul and Spirit in Action program. I have a line that I include in my description saying past/present religious/spiritual influences. And some people won't choose to use those names, but I'm not attached to any of them in a strong way. I just want to capture what is big picture, past and present, what you've learned, what you've rejected, where you settled. All of that is interesting to me. And you care to share with our listeners for Song of the Soul any particular parts, past, present, about religious, spiritual influences?
I guess the really biggest influence that I would say that I got that I would call spiritual is what it comes down to for me is this discovery of the love of humanity and community and the notion of an egalitarian, just society and the struggle against injustice. I mean, there's so much about that has such biblical overtones as well, or overtones that are common in a lot of different sort of religious stories about the history of conflict and justice and injustice. And there's so much to say about the spiritual, what we could characterize as the spiritual aspects of life, because it's vast and connected to everything. The beauty of life is so profound, and that, of course, you could organize lots of religions and philosophies around it, but also the struggle to preserve life in the face of the forces of destruction and greed and empire and capitalism. To me, that there is a religious quality to that calling to understand this whole situation on this one single planet that we all share and call home to life, and everything of life that we know. It's all here. All the spirituals, everything, it's all here on this one planet. And I think my quest has always been to understand what is going on here, and how are we messing things up this badly, and how can we possibly dig ourselves out of this, and continue as a species with an atmosphere that's breathable and stuff like that. So as I've been sort of called to, that path of understanding the world and how it got this way and what we can do about it, I would say for a lot of other people, that's their spiritual calling, and they name it differently. They wouldn't call themselves atheists like I would. They would call themselves Catholics or Jews or Muslims or whatever else, and they might identify with, if they're Catholics, they might identify more with the Jesuits and liberation theology than with some other elements of the Catholic Church. Or if they're, same kind of thing, if If they're Muslim, they might be more oriented towards all sorts of different resistance-oriented movements than they might be oriented towards working for the Saudi government or something. Yeah, I mean, there's different religious elements for all these different, different sort of wings of different religions that might attract the more sort of people oriented towards actually making a difference in the world,
So many Jews have been amazing workers for peace and justice in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even the more conservative end of Judaism isn't necessarily in any way holding back from peace and justice itself, but there's this whole range of it. You go to Islam and you got your Sunnism, and they're perfectly good in some ways, some places. But Sufis are a different flavor that many of us are inspired by. And there is a range within any single name. And I find it pretty impressive. I look for the light in things, and that's not to say I pretend the dark isn't there. But
yeah,
when we make things on, off, either or, we miss out a lot of the truth that's there as well.
Yeah, and there's so much complexity out there, that's for sure.
So for your past, I think today you mostly identify as atheist, or pretty clearly identify as atheist. I don't know. I probably don't believe in the same God you don't believe in, but
yeah, right.
There's a lot of differences,
I could say humanist as well. I mean, I like the older I get, the more I understand why the humanists prefer calling themselves humanists and atheists, because the humanist society is an atheist society. That's what it is. But they prefer the term humanist, and I get that, because it's not about not believing in something. It's about believing in humanity, It's not about not believing in a mythical figure. Why would you even want to define yourself that way? I mean, it's about believing in something. And that's something I believe in is humanity, But to the extent that I've been profoundly influenced by people who do believe in, the sort of, in mythology as a basis for their philosophy of life. Yeah, I've been profoundly influenced by all sorts of, Christian thinking and Buddhist thinking and Taoist thinking. And it also doesn't matter to me whether the history that people are talking about happened or didn't happen. It doesn't matter. It's about, thinking and philosophy and understanding the world and using stories to illustrate that understanding. And I totally get that as a storyteller. I totally get that. It's a great way to understand the world. And it doesn't matter if stories that you're talking about from 2,000 years ago really happened or not. Anyway, it's about philosophy and understanding ourselves and the world around us.
Well, why don't you knit us together with some more of your songs? As I said, we're going to move on faster, folks, here. This is Song of the Soul. Our website, northernspiritradio.org, where you can find all of our guests of the past 20-plus years on the website, for both Song of the Soul, Spirit in Action. And I've had David Rovics here for both of those programs in the past. Just come to the site, search it, listen, and suggest to us some more places we should be going, people we should be checking out, music that we should be finding, activists that we should get to know and find the witness that they're bringing to this world. You can do that all via northernspiritradio.org. Please leave comments to our programs. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, where we should be searching. And you can check out the 38 stations across the country that carry our programs. I'm sorry to say it's only 38. At one point it was upward the 40s, but a lot of radio stations, of course, have been pulling back or declining in the internet age. We still have so many wonderful radio stations and communities throughout this country. And please check them out and listen to their music, support them with your body and your wallet. And don't forget to support Northern Spirit Radio, and certainly support all of these wonderful activists and musicians. Again, with your body and your wallet, there's ways we can help out. It doesn't all have to be dollars. And in fact, I think we cheapen our connection when we convert it only into money. So please reach out and support. And we're going to launch right now into a lot of music from David Rovic for today's Song of the Soul. Where do we go first?
The next song I have on our list is called The Red and the Blue, and it's the title track of one of the, 10 albums I have put out over the past few months with my AI band that I call Aitsuno, Aitsuno, which is a Japanese woman's name, Aitsuno. I've been writing songs with this AI platform where I write all the lyrics and I work with the platform to come up with the music. And it's an amazing process that I could talk about all day, that a much vilified technology that a lot of people just don't realize how much potential there is. Both disruptive potential as well as incredible creative potential. But yeah, this is the only song I've got on the list that's from the past few months of songs that I've written with this AI band. When it originally came out, it was not me singing. And so what I've done with a lot of these songs, some of the songs, is I've learned them myself, like cover songs. And so this is me singing a song that I wrote with an AI band. So I did not write the music. I'm covering my own lyrics and AI band written song here, however that is to be described. I was trying to be brief with this, but I'll be briefer with the other ones.
And folks, I should mention the song, The Red and the Blue, is actually supposed to be released, I think, on April 15th. Is there a reason you choose to release it on tax day? I mean, is there something? And this is remix, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, so I did an album called Insurrection Act, which is all songs that me and Kamala sang just acoustically. That came out on March 1st. And they were pretty much all songs, or 18 of the 20 were songs that I had done with the AI band that we then learned basically as covers and recorded it as an acoustic album. But as an album with a band, to complicate matters, a human band, adding tracks and stuff, it's going to come out as a remix album with more instrumentation on April 15th.
So there's something to be happy about on tax day.
That's right.
There'll be a remix album, including this song, The Red and the Blue.
Leaving California, people warned me to beware. They said all kinds of folks in Texas just don't care about their neighbors. But when I got there, I discovered that it wasn't so, 'cause there's really no such thing as red and blue. Just lots of folks like me and you. All the bigots there, but the more I traveled, the more I wondered there were all these people about which I'd heard. Flags flying from pickup trucks and flipping me the bird, 'cause there's really no such thing as red and blue. Just lots of folks like me and you. Everywhere I went, I just encountered gracious folk, from the fancy strip malls to the homeless and the broke. So much like around here, with every class and creed, so much better than you guess from my feed, 'cause there's really no such thing as red and blue. Just lots of folks like me and you. Yeah, there's really no such thing as red and blue. Just lots of folks like me and you.
As David Rovix tells us in that song, there's really no such thing as red and blue, just lots of folks like me and you. That's an inspiring song, by the way, David. Someone who has been as politically active as you've been, a lot of people sink into hating the other. And I think you can recognize what's bad in the world without hating and finding a way forward together. So the idea that you go from California, or in your case, from Oregon or whatever, and you head over to Texas, and you can say, there's good folks in Texas, but that's a red state. Oh my goodness. That's hopeful for me.
Yeah, and the way that we caricature people is so sad. And, especially in a country like this where you have two choices to vote for, politically. And then we think we can characterize the other, whoever votes for one or the other choice in certain ways. We can put them in all these boxes because they made this one choice, when there was only two to choose from in the first place. I mean, it is just so crazy that people would do that, just say throw one group out completely, a bunch of Marxists or a bunch of fascists or whatever. I mean, it's just madness, this kind of thinking.
How many of your close friends are MAGA?
I know a lot of people who actually are coming out of this kind of
We'll leave it there for part 1 of this 2-part visit with David Rovics, but we'll find out next week if David has any MAGA-identified friends, and we'll hear another 5, maybe 6 of his songs. See you next week for Song of the Soul. The theme music for Song of the Soul is by Chris Williamson, and it is called Song of the Soul. Check out all things Song of the Soul on northernspiritradio.org, guests, links, stations, and a place for your feedback, suggestions, and support. Send your Songs of the Soul to me, Mark Helpsmeet, via the info on our website, and join us weekly for Song of the Soul.